Welcome to the New American Magazine. I'm Bill Jasper. In June, the U.S. Supreme Court rendered a number of very important decisions. One of the most important and most controversial, of course, being its Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade. That came at the end of a number of weeks of extreme controversy in the media over a leaked draft, an unprecedented leak of a draft of the Supreme Court in May, potentially jeopardizing the decision one way or the other. But the controversy over the Dobbs decision and the leaked draft overshadowed and actually eclipsed a very important decision that came out on May 2nd. It was the decision of Shurtleff versus Boston. And we have with us today Hal Shurtleff, and we're going to discuss the importance of the Supreme Court decision. It was a unanimous decision, quite amazingly, and something we don't see that often at the U.S. Supreme Court. So we have with us today Hal Shurtleff. Hal, you brought a lawsuit against the city of Boston in 2017, correct?
Yes.
Well, actually,
yes. We actually Liberty Counsel, who was our legal team, they sent a demand letter to the city of Boston, demanding that they either let us fly the flag or we will file a lawsuit. The lawsuit was actually filed in July of 2018.
Okay, and the cause of your complaint against the city was they would not specifically allow you to fly your flag for Camp Constitution, a Christian flag that had a cross on it, correct? And
yes,
tell us why. Okay, very good. There we see the white field with the red cross on it there. So walk us through that and explain. They allowed hundreds of other organizations,
sure,
and including foreign nations, including LGBTQ organizations, rainbow flags, etc. Correct?
That's correct. Well, the city of Boston started this program where civic organizations could raise flags, have a ceremony, raise flags. I think they started it in 2008 or 2007. I became aware of it when I was being dismissed for jury duty at the Suffolk Superior Court, and I crossed the street and they were flying the flag of Communist China. And I was, my goodness, this is a little over the top even for Boston. And it was a private group called the Chinese Progressive Association of Boston. And I think it was in 2014, I was involved with a group that raised the Gadsden flag on City Hall Plaza. That's the flag with the rattlesnake yellow background, said, "Don't tread on me." And the city was very cooperative. We had a little ceremony. I think we were exposing at that time. We were putting a spotlight on Agenda 21. And we had and the flags flew for about a whole week. I had to have a friend of mine that used to work for the city to take it down. But it was in June of 17 that a inner city pastor, Bruce Wall, was holding a prayer vigil or a prayer meeting in the mayor's office. The mayor had nothing to do with it. He was nowhere to be found. But I was invited, and I was very impressed by what was happening. We had blacks, whites, Hispanics, Asian, Christians praying for peace, praying for harmony in the city, and yes, praying for elected officials. You know, we're told to pray for those in positions of authority. We don't necessarily have to like them or agree with what they're doing, but we do have to pray for them. And after leaving that, I thought that we should really step up to the plate. And I thought we should hold a ceremony to commemorate Constitution Day, which is September 17th, and also Boston's rich Christian history. And the city of Boston was founded, of course, years before the Constitution was adopted or ratified, but about the same time, mid-September. And so I got a hold of the lady in charge of the permitting, whom I dealt with in the past. And she said, "What would you like to do?" I said, "Well, we're going to have a few speakers. We're going to fly the Christian flag." And I sent her a picture of it in the email. And it took about a month before I got a no. And she actually said, "I know this is not the end of it." And I asked for an official response. and either in a letter or in an email. And I got an email response from the man who became the defendant, Gregory Rooney, and he said that it's a violation of the First Amendment. When I got that email, I knew we had a case because we know the separation of church and state is not in the First Amendment. The ironic thing is that in the email and embedded in the email was the city seal, which also appears on the city flag. The city seal has a Bible verse from First Kings that says, "May God favor us as He favored our forefathers." It's in Latin, so I know you'd understand it, but most people probably
That
wouldn't
hasn't
know.
been removed yet, right?
No, it hasn't. It's still there. It's in all. You go in any like every city park has the seal somewhere, and it's quite amazing. So that evening, I sent out a news release to the local media. Not one member of the media at that point was interested, but a friend of mine, Lynn Roberts of Second Amendment Sisters, said, "Get a hold of Liberty Counsel." And I went on their website, and it was probably about 10 o'clock in the evening, and put down what was going on. The very next morning, I get a call from one of their attorneys, Roger Mast, who's based in Lynchburg, Virginia, and he said, "We want to take your case." Excellent. So they did, and they said, "We'll take it all the way to the Supreme Court if necessary." So of course we lost in the first district court, and then the Court of Appeals. And Liberty Counsel did an incredible job. They were determined, and back the Supreme Court accepted or decided to hear the case September 30th of last year, 2021. And I understand that they only take about 1% of the 800 or so cases that come before them. So that was, to me, I think it was all God's hand was in this from the very beginning. The thought of us having a Supreme Court case and winning 9-0 was not that was not the first thing in my mind back when I filed for the petition. We thought we'd have, I mean, the permit, we thought we'd have a nice ceremony, we would probably have 30, 40 people there. And we were going to do it every year. It would have been an annual event and have a nice video as well. But the city had other thoughts. And it is ironic though, first they said it was a separation of church and state, and then they added approved government speech that somehow, now I have to explain that the city, I use the term public access flagpole. They have 3 flagpoles in front of City Hall Plaza. The first one is the U.S. flag. The second one has the flag of Massachusetts. And the third one usually flies the city's flag, unless they're having a ceremony. So they flow like the Bunker Hill flag, has flies right to commemorate Battle of Bunker Hill. But a lot of groups that have maybe foreign connections, Italian, Israelis, Portuguese, these groups will have a ceremony to commemorate some historic event in their community. And it includes the Chinese Progressive Association, which really, they fly the communist flag of China. And what they're commemorating was the Chinese Revolution. And what makes it even sadder is that city officials have actually participated in the event. It's a private event, but they invited city officials, including Ayanna Pressley, who was a city councilor before she became a member of the infamous squad. And so they did, I think, 282 other flag raising ceremonies did occur. It wasn't that many organizations. Some years it would be the same every year. It'd be the same group. There was a Black nationalist group that flies the Black nationalist flag to commemorate Marcus Garvey's birthday and Juneteenth before it became a national holiday. And they actually reached out to me. They were in sympathy. They said, "You guys should be able to raise your flag. It shouldn't have been an issue." So again, the city offered to settle in October of last year, and we did not want to settle because, first off, we think the case is bigger than just a flag raising ceremony. I think it had to do with repealing this thing known as the Lemon Law, which is a law that goes back to a U.S. Supreme Court decision, not a law, that deals with the so-called separation of church and state. And I think that governments around the country took a look at that, and they were petrified to have any type of religious expression. They were afraid of it, to the point where I heard a case where a principal in a high school said no candy canes because the candy cane is shaped like a J, and it's a Christian allegory behind the candy cane. And you can't say "God bless you" if you sneeze after someone sneezes. That's totally ridiculous. And so there's been a number of decisions over the last 5 years. In our case was similar to the Coach Kennedy case, because the defendants use that same government speech uh, line. It was what was interesting. It was when the city said that it's not approved government speech. They were saying that we indeed do approve of the flags of Communist China and Communist Cuba, as well as the other flags they allow to fly.
Now, this has been going on for quite a few years on the flagpoles before your case came up, right?
Yeah, it's about 12 years. It's been about 12 years
years.
since they've had this. Unfortunately, it's a costly mistake to ever initiate this program because the city is paying Liberty Council's legal fees, which I guess are quite substantial. After 5 years, and they're based in Florida, and they have an office in D.C., and they've had numerous visits to Boston, and then visits in D.C., and lots and lots of work. Again, almost 5 years worth, and it's going to culminate next week, Wednesday, 11 a.m. The city has agreed to allow us to fly the flag. This would be a one-time thing. It's based under the old policy that they violated. Now they've canceled their flag raising ceremony. In fact, we've learning about a number of cities and towns have got out of the flag raising business, except for the U.S. flag, the state flag, and maybe the town flag and the POW flag. We've heard from California, Florida, Massachusetts, even Martha's Vineyard. There's a town in Martha's Vineyard that said no more flags. Delaware, Ohio, the same thing. We're just going to, and I think basically that's what it should be done. That way, there you don't have to worry about you got to offend somebody, no matter what flag you fly. Too bad. So maybe they should.
Right, and the Temple of Satan is trying to raise flag now in a number of places. And
well, yeah, we were talked about that. You and I talked about the Temple of Satan. Now, there's a Temple of Satan in Salem, Massachusetts. They had 12 years to fly a flag. They never applied for a permit to raise their flag until 2 days after our case was decided. They went on Twitter and they said, we want to fly our flag. Well, I mean, you had 12 years. What took you so long, And some of the folks will argue that, well, if they have flag, the Christian flag, they got to fly, Nazi flags and other kinds of odious flags. I says, well, they're already flying communist flags. I say that's pretty odious. And they say satanic. Well, the communist China is an atheist entity, but what they're doing is pretty evil and wicked.
Now, what's interesting in the case is that the majority opinion was written by Stephen Breyer as
that's right.
one of his last decisions, correct?
Correct, and he was a Harvard law professor, and he's actually coming back to Harvard. Maybe I'll invite him to the flag raising ceremony if he's available. It was interesting in his decision. He made reference to the monstrosity of City Hall, the ugly, it's called brutalist architecture. It's fun. I don't know how many decisions they somehow they make reference to the architecture of the building.
So he and Sotomayor and Kagan make up the liberal left triumvirate on the court, and yet he wrote the decision, and you even had amicus brief from the ACLU in your favor. Right?
Yeah, the ACLU and the Department of Justice under the Biden administration, and that was sort of unprecedented. And so I think the ACLU, I think we would have won the case, but I think the ACLU probably may have been persuaded the three liberal justices to vote the right way.
That is interesting because you referenced earlier the Lemon Law, or the Lemon Ruling, which has become known as the Lemon Rule, which was Lemon versus, what was the school?
It was a school in Providence. I think it was a Catholic school in Providence, Rhode Island. Or in Rhode
Island. So Lemon, Alton Lemon, if I remember correctly, was an ACLU, lifelong ACLU member. He was an atheist and a leader in the Ethical Humanist Society, which is a fancy name for an organization promoting atheism, very militantly anti-Christian. They and the ACLU have been waging war on Christianity for pretty much most of the past century, and we see that in many of the cases. So it seems to me it's quite remarkable that in this case it was such an egregious, obvious act of animus toward and bias toward your group, towards the Christian flag, that even the ACLU felt they had to jump on board and at least portray themselves as being fair in this case.
Well, I do. I appreciate the fact. The New Hampshire, I live in New Hampshire now. The New Hampshire director wrote a letter to the editors of some newspapers. While I find Mr. Shurtleff's views odious and so forth and so on, we do want to congratulate him. So I responded by saying, I probably find your views odious too, even though I don't know all of them. I'm sure I will find most of them odious. I think in the brief too, they said that they made reference to what we believed. They disagreed with what we believed, but we have a right to fly the flag.
Now, briefly here, your flag was for Camp Constitution. Tell us about Camp Constitution.
Well, we're a New Hampshire-based charitable trust. We started out by running week-long family camps, and then as time went on, I became a full-time person. I started just a volunteer. And we have a publishing arm. In addition to the family camps, we have weekend retreats now. We have ladies' retreats. We have a publishing arm. Some of the things we publish were things that you folks publish, like "And Not a Shot Is Fired," that old communist track back. And we have the Blumenfeld archives. Of course, Sam was a dear friend of yours. But Sam willed me most of his papers and writings and works in his recordings. And thanks to Mark Affleck, our camp newspaper editor, as well as our webmaster, Eric Conver, we created this great online resource for homeschoolers, educators, historians. Sam was a fascinating man. And not only do we have all the homeschool materials, but we have his correspondence, his interview with Mose Shombe, I hope I'm pronouncing it right. He was the founder or co-founder of the Jewish Society of Americanists, and we have, I think, maybe the only place in the world with their newsletters and some of their correspondence. And he was also the American Friends of Algeria, which he was involved in too. And we have a lot of their publications on our website. If you go right to the Blumenfeld campconstitution.net, you can see the Blumenfeld archive. And all we ask is an email and a username, and you have unlimited access to countless hours of audio, video, his incredible alpha phonics. It was interesting. We are actually getting people from all over the world. We have a Christian school in Harare, Zimbabwe, that reached out to us, and we donated some of the alpha phonics workbooks to them. So we're very pleased to do that. And they sent me some short little videos of them teaching the Blumenfeld. They call it the Blumenfeld approach. That's the term they use. And the principal is now taking this and using it. He's introducing it to some of the other schools in the country. So we're very something that most American teachers want nothing to do with. We see it in a communist country like Zimbabwe very well accepted.
Oh, yes, sir. Sam Blumenfeld is a dear friend. He was a contributing editor to the New American Magazine, and before that to our predecessor, American Opinion, and was one of the most important pioneers in exposing the dangers of the government control of education with his book, Is Public Education Necessary? And his book on the NEA, the National Education Association, which are still landmark books in that area. Very briefly, you're a military veteran, correct?
Yeah, I was in the U.S. Army. I did a tour of duty with the 101st Airborne and a couple of years in field artillery in Germany. That's why my hearing isn't so great. And I spent some time in the Army Reserves too. Every time my enlistment came up, they threatened to promote me, and I left an E6, a staff sergeant.
And you were also for many years a coordinator staff member for the John Birch Society in the Northeast, right?
26 years. I was New England coordinator, and I was a regional field director. I think it kind of changed, but I used to go as far as North Dakota and South Dakota, all the way down to some of the southern states, Pennsylvania, New England, New York.
And you're continuing to carry on the fight, and congratulations. That big win in the Supreme Court is a big win for everyone, for the whole country. And that was quite remarkable, and very few people heard about it because the very next day, all of the furor broke on the Supreme Court draft leak. And
Well,
most people haven't heard about it.
yeah, we made a lot of media for the last 5 years. It was covered in New York Times. I think it was the head of the ACLU did an op-ed in the Washington Post. But when we got the news, I got the call from our attorney at 10 o'clock, May 2nd, and I was interviewed by dozens of media outlets, and I was on Newsmax. I was ready to go on the Rob Schmidt show. That's when the leak came out. I thought, oh, they're going to bump me. So they called me, the producer. I'm all set to go on, and Mike Huckabee is before me, and they asked me if I didn't want to talk about Roe v. Wade. And I said, yeah, sure, but I want to talk about the case. But yeah, of course I'll talk about it. They didn't know what my position was. They probably assumed I was sympathetic to seeing it repealed. So I was able to plug the movie Roe v. Wade. That depicted the character of Dr. Mildred Jefferson, who was a dear friend of mine. I mentioned that. I said, and the actress that portrays her has become a recent friend of mine, Stacey Dash. Kind of a small world. Funny how God puts people in. But Dr. Jefferson was the first Black woman to graduate from Harvard Medical School, and she was she was a friend of Larry McDonald. Of course, the congressman who was playing was shot down by the Soviets in 1983, and she was a pioneer in the Right to Life movement. And I'm very glad to see her character depicted in the movie. She should be a household name. And the actress Stacey Dash, she's relocated. She's kind of left Hollywood, and we were able to help her out this past winter, where she needed some place to stay. We had friends that were able to set her up, and she's a wonderful lady, and I was very honored to know both of them.
Wonderful. Well, best of wishes. Keep up the good work, and we'll be checking back with you. Thank you, Hal.
All right, thank you. God bless.
Thank you.